like to call the regular Board of Education meeting to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Keeling, second by Mr. Anderson. All those in favor by a show of hands? So moved. Item 3A, Citizens Participation Statement. Dr. Henry.
We had no one request participation as per policy BDDH, Mr. President.
Thank you. Item 4A, Written Communication.
We had no written communication either.
Thank you. Item 5A, Military Liaison Update.
Good evening, Mr. President. Just for awareness, last week, Command Sergeant Major Larry Orvis had changed of responsibility from Sergeant Major Goolsby, and he'll be involved. He's our Garrison Sergeant Major now, and he'll be very involved with the PI program. And also, he'll plan to get around the schools just to say hi and offer his support. A couple key activities that we have coming up, Mr. President, on the 2nd of December at 1900 at Baker Theater will be the 399th Army Band. We'll be playing a holiday concert for the entire community. And then Fort Leonard Wood will light their tree on the 6th of December at 1730 at Joint Service Park. And finally, on behalf of the leadership and service members and families of Fort Leonard Wood, we wish to say to the school board and the school administrator, teachers, and support staff a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving coming up this week.
Thank you.
All right.
Item 5B, District Announcements. Dr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I see we have the Partridge crew back here. Hello. How you doing? Okay, we're gonna recognize them momentarily, but always great to see Partridge here. Tonight we'll recognize Partridge, now our largest school on Fort Leonard Wood. And I want to thank each and every one of you for all that you do for our students in kindergarten through 5th grade, and I look forward to tonight's Spotlight on Education. Tonight we celebrate that the Waynesville R-VI Annual Performance Report score from DESE is 97.5%, putting us again at the top of the Ozark Conference. We're not only on the top as far as academics go, but we're also the most diverse school district in the conference, and 97.5% is a record for our school district. I want to congratulate everyone on the success and thank our board for rewarding our staff members with Jeans Day coupons instead of cakes. They might have wanted Jeans Day coupons and cakes, though. That might have been, and they certainly deserve it. So we'll keep that in mind. They are definitely a hit. I don't wear jeans to the office, so I was bartering mine around the district to sell off my three tickets. Didn't get much success there, though. I want to thank the community for their support, particularly for attending the WCC 50th Anniversary Open House, Meet the Tiger Night, and Tip-Off Party. I would like to invite everyone to attend our Winter Fine Arts events between December 3rd and 18th. We have 9 plays, choir, and band concerts, and they are on the district's online calendar. I would also like to invite you to attend our winter sports events. The girls basketball varsity team's first regular home game will be December the 5th. The boys basketball varsity team's first home game will be December the 2nd against Lebanon. And the wrestling team will have just 2 home matches this year, one on January 20th and the other one on January 31st. There will also be no school on Wednesday, November 23rd through Friday, November 25th for the Thanksgiving holiday. Everybody's cheering in the background here. So, and students will return on Monday, November the 28th. Finally, I would like to say happy Thanksgiving to our community, to all of our staff and our students. This is a tremendously supportive community. We would not be where we are, and we had the successes we've had over the last several years without your support. So thank you.
Thank you. Item 6A, Financials. Dr. Berger.
Thank you, Mr. President. November 10th, 2016, in MoSIP account, $39,080,439.70. In CDs with the Bank of Crocker, $10.5 million. General account, $374,235.49. Payroll account is $6,937.17. Insurance account, $585,669.28. Total funds, $50,547,581.64.
For the consent agenda, we will also approve the study session minutes for October the 17th, the regular Board of Education minutes for October the 17th, the closed session minutes for October the 17th, and the closed session minutes Part 2 for October the 17th, and we'll approve those as presented. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Schultz, second by Ms. Swant. All those in favor by a show of hands. So moved. Item 7A, Spotlight on Education. Mr. Hawkersmith.
All right, I'd like to take just a moment to thank the administration on behalf of the CTA and the board for allowing us this opportunity to recognize one of Waynesville's many amazing teachers. Miss Amanda Shalbert from Partridge Elementary will be receiving this month's CTA Spotlight on Education Award. This is Miss Shalbert's 9th year teaching first grade at Partridge Elementary. Next year, she will be eligible for sainthood. She has her master's degree in reading from MSU. Ms. Shalbert has played a vital role in the development and implementation of Partridge's PBIS program. She has served on the district assessment team at her grade level and is currently Partridge Teacher Leader Representative. Ms. Shalbert meets the needs of all of her students, even the most challenging, through her creativity and innovation. She is always ready to utilize new strategies to ensure her student success. Ms. Shalbert was the first at Partridge to use flexible seating. Her successful implementation has motivated several of her colleagues to adopt this new concept. Over the years, Ms. Shalbert has facilitated several student teachers and is always willing to mentor new faculty in her building. Her enthusiasm for education can be seen by her students, their parents, and her colleagues, as she can rarely be found without a smile on her face. Ms. Shalbert is an invaluable part of the Partridge team. Thank you.
Michelle. Item 8A, Health Program Evaluation, Ms. Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am excited to talk about our health services program today, and all of our school nurses are here, and they do a fabulous job working with our students to make sure their health care needs are met. I have some action shots for you with our nurses working hard with the students. We have 2 program goals for our health services department. We want to make sure we have a healthy learning environment, and we also want to educate students about health care as well as our staff members. There's several objectives that our health program strives to meet. We do screening and referrals. We take care of illness and injury, accident reports, immunization, CPR, and many, many different things that we strive to meet as our objectives for the program. Here's our current staffing plan as compared to last school year. Pretty comparable staffing plan, and our number of RNs and LPNs has remained pretty stable. There's a highlight of Wendy Finch. She's our lead RN who helps run the program. I know she's happy I put her photo right there. We sent out a staff questionnaire at the end of last school year to the district to see if we were meeting the needs. We had a high amount of yeses for confidentiality. Teachers felt like the nurse was a medical resource for them. They felt like the nurse has a plan to assist the students, and if a student is seriously injured or ill, they felt like they received adequate information. So we were pleased with the staff questionnaire results. The Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services considers any rating above 96% as excellent for district immunization compliance. As you see, we're well above 96% for all of our immunizations. So I have them lined out. We're at 98% or above for all our immunizations across the district. Our nurses work with a wide variety of students who have special health care needs. So I put some of those statistics on there from last year to this school year. I won't read through all of them, but these are some of our kids who have special health care needs, and the buildings report that information out to us. They were very busy with healthcare screenings. Last year, they did over 3,000 vision screenings, and they did over 3,000 hearing screenings as well. The great thing is with those screenings, they were able to catch any concerns. So the district referred 246 students on for visual exams and 167 students on for hearing exams based on the screenings. Here's a snapshot of our district healthcare report in 1 month. If you'll look for September of last school year, the nurses were very busy. They saw over 5,000 students. They passed 2,850 meds. They had over 8,000 health room visits, and they sent 178 students home. This year, they're even busier. They saw over 7,711 students. They passed almost 3,000 meds. They saw 10,000 students, and they sent 298 students home. So very, very busy. Any questions?
I just have one.
Yes, sir.
For the, what is it? I want to mess it. The vocational building, the alternative school.
Yes.
Who covers that if they need a nurse?
We have a nurse there at the building.
Are we?
Are you talking about our alternative school?
Oh, alternative school. I'm sorry. At Pick, yes. Nurse Hillman, who's at Williams Early Childhood Center, she covers Pick. So that's since she's close in location, she does a great job of taking care of those students there.
Any other questions?
Just a comment, Dr. Fulmer. Mr. Washington, this was a very thorough and complete report. I gained a lot of information on how you put this together in this short snapshot. So I wanted to thank you very much, and also thank our nurses out there in all of our buildings.
Yes, thank you guys very much. Right.
Any other questions? Item 8B, 2016 Annual Performance Report, Dr. Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'm going to present our 2016 Annual Performance Report. DESE, the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, is charged with accrediting school districts, and that has looked different throughout the years. Currently, we are on their MSIP version 5, which looks at a variety of criteria. Now, we all know when we look at this doesn't tell the whole story about all the great work that goes on in our buildings, but this is the one set of criteria that the state looks at districts across the state to measure us on certain measures for the accreditation purposes. Under MSIP 5, there are 140 points possible, and depending on the number of points that a district has, determines how they are accredited. At this time, any district with 70% or more of points is considered accredited. There was accredited with distinction criteria in MSIP 4. It was supposed to be here in MSIP 5. They've just not enacted that piece of it yet because they can't agree on all the small pieces. So when the state accreditation list comes out, even though we had nearly 100% of points, we will still just be labeled accredited. So no worries that we don't see the accredited with distinction, as that is not currently being used. The first measure that they look at is academic achievement, and that is worth 56 points, so that is a large number of points, and they look at performance in English language arts, math, science, and social studies. And they don't just look at 1 year of data. One of the first way to earn points is through a 3-year status, and so they look at a number called MPI, which is MAP Performance Index, and that is what those numbers in the 300s there represent, and that is really, they look at how many students were advanced, proficient, basic, and below basic, and there is a formula, and it comes out and tells you how many points you received on that MAP Performance Index. This year in ELA, we had 366.8 points, and that is in what's considered the approaching range. The state has set some targets. There's the 2020 target, there's on track, approaching, and the floor, and depending on where you fall is how many base points you get for a 3-year average of your MPIs. An important thing to point out is that the tests in ELA and math have changed. So those numbers have went down in MPI statewide based on how the criteria were scored. For our 3-year status, while those are in the approaching range, we did earn 9 points for those. We did earn on progress. In ELA, we had 6 points. But the one really important number in there is growth. Progress looks at your overall change in scores from year to year. Growth looks at individual students and how they perform. So on those growth points in ELA and math where it shows that we earned 12 points, what that's telling us is that individual students, we are growing them over time. So that was really important. The most points that you can get in ELA, math, and science is 16, and we did earn all of those points. And in social studies, we could earn 8, and we did earn all of those. One important thing to point out regarding ELA and math is there's a provision called safe harbor. Because of the changes in the test, they don't want to just look at 1 year of scores. So they look at the points that a district earned in 2014, 15, or 16 in ELA and math, and you get the highest of those. We did not have to use safe harbor because we earned the full 16 points based on our 2016 scores. So that is something that we are very proud of. Many districts have relied on the safe harbor to get their points. In the area of subgroup achievement, there are 14 possible points, and this year we earned 11.5 points under that. The subgroup is made up of students who are African American, Hispanic, ELL, on free or reduced lunch, or who receive special education services. They're put into a super subgroup, and their scores are looked at separately because the state wants to know how you're doing with those populations. And this is a group that we are focusing on as a district because their achievement does not match our overall achievement, so we're wanting to make sure that we have structures in place to support all of our students. Another measure that they look at are the college and career readiness measures. CCR 1 through 3 looks at student performance on the SAT, ACT, ASVAB, Compass, and Work Keys. And you earn points based on student scores on those. Our 3-year status is 67.7% of possible points in that, which earned us 7.5 points, and then our progress, meaning our change over the years, was 2 points, so we earned 9.5 out of 10 points in that area. The next measure in college and career readiness looks at students enrolled in advanced courses, and we already exceed the 2020 target but on our 3-year status. Post-secondary follow-up, this looks at what students are doing 6 months after graduation, meaning that we have to contact all of our graduates to find out if they are enrolled in a 2 or 4 year program, if they're in the military, if they're working in employment that's related to their college and career track, if they participated in classes at the Career Center. We were able to track down all but 8 of our students this year, and 90% of them met the criteria, and our 3-year average on that is 88.1%, which is phenomenal to think that you have to find kids after they've left you and ensure that they are engaged in activities that the state as well as the national level would like to see them engaged in. Another standard is attendance. Missouri looks at attendance quite differently than any other state. They look at students who are here 90% or more of the time. So if a student is here 90% of the time, you get a point for them. If they're not, you get a 0. And so they add up all the points that you earn, divide it by the number of students you have, and that is your 90-90 attendance average. In 2016, we continued on our 3-year trend of increase where we had 91.2% of students here 90% of the time or more. Our 3-year average is 90.2, which is above the 2020 target level, so we earned full points. And when you think about that, that 90% means a student can be absent 17 days and still meet the mark. So our schools have done a lot of work to ensure that they're following up quickly when students are absent, to make sure that they're here, or if families need support with ensuring that their children are here. These are the attendance averages for each building. All of our buildings except the high school earned the full points, but I do want to point out that the high school did increase over the previous year. It's just that for progress purposes, they had not increased enough to earn progress points, but again, they are definitely on the right track with their attendance. The last measure that the state looks at is graduation rate, and you earn points based on students graduating in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, or 7 years, and whichever earns you the most points, that's the one they give you. We do want to point out that while for our 4-year rate, we earned 28.5 APR points on that, when you look at our 4-year graduation rate, it has steadily climbed from 2014 to 15 to 2016. Our 3-year status was just shy of being in the 2020 target range, but our 5-year rate was definitely there. So we did earn our points based on our 5-year rate, and we did earn all 30 points. As I stated at the beginning, the annual performance report is worth 140 points. We did earn 136.5 points this year for 97.5% of the points. That is the 4th year in a row. So that we have continued to increase. And so we are very proud of the work that our teachers and administrators are doing at the building level to ensure that our students are learning each and every day when they come to school. Questions?
Questions? Comments? The board, truly appreciates all the hard work that our teachers do to go into getting a 97 plus score on achievement. That's a phenomenal effort on everybody's part, and we thank you from the bottom of our heart for all that work that you put into it. Any other questions or concerns?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 8C, revised job description, first reading. Ms. Bales?
Thank you, Mr. President. The following attached proposed job description revisions are presented for your review as a first reading. 4.11.3 Freshman Center Secretary High School, 4.12.4 Guidance Assistant Secretary High School. The administration will request approval at the regular December board meeting.
Questions? Okay. Item 8D, Transportation Facility Improvement Closeout. Dr. Berger?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Really, thank you, Board. I know Mr. Wilkins expressed that last, I think it was last month when we did the program evaluation, but a great project. We've finished phase 1 of the transportation facility, the site work, and DHA, Don Hussman, is here to do a closeout presentation.
Thank you. As Dr. Berger says, this evening is sort of a celebration of sorts, completion of another construction project. Am I doing this right? Here we go. Those of you may remember existing site conditions, and I won't go into this in great detail, but that's how the bus facility, transportation facility looked a couple of years ago. Initially, I believe, Dr. Berger, we spoke about this project in the summer of 2014. So some 2 years later here, it has materialized. It's gone through a number of transitions, and I'm going to go right to the site plan that was constructed. So you can see that there's quite a substantial difference. We picked up, or I should back up. We were trying to determine the amount of buses that we were parking. Carl, do you remember initially? I think it was right in the 70 number. We couldn't. None of us could remember. We should know that. But the lot now is currently striped, and the bus parking is in this gray zone right here. and we can accommodate up to 85 spaces, and we have actually a number of spaces that are able to be expanded to pick up 12 more buses on that lot. The other component that really modified this is that initially, and I won't go back to the previous diagram, but initially we were actually parking buses in this zone on the East Elementary lot. So we were able to restripe that East Elementary lot, modify the circulation for parent pickup, and I believe we picked up about 21 spaces on that lot. And then the other really nice improvement was the driver's parking area, and we have about 96 spaces on that lot. So it really has enhanced the project considerably, the pavement and regrading areas. We're going to see some photos here in a moment, but as Dr. Berger had indicated, this is a two-phase project. This phase, the grading site improvements, is really phase one. Phase two of the project would be to modify or expand the existing building. Our initial thoughts were that we would see some improvements in this zone, but we actually, after we got into the project, looked like we may be adding to both, I'll call it the top area and the lower area, to the existing building. Obviously, that would need to be programmed and finalized before that second phase. That second phase of construction would add about somewhere between 6,000 to 8,000 square feet of area to the existing building. So if we look at some of the photos, we had a beautiful, this was about 2 weeks ago, our last and final meeting, construction meeting, which also coincided with the substantial completion. If you recall, that's the closeout of a project for its intended use. The facility was being used on the day that we visited, which I believe was November the 4th. We can see the buses here all aligned, diagonally parked. Another view, something that's somewhat of an improvement are the engine block heaters that are available to the buses. Another view as we approach into the site. The parking at the rear of the building, which is substantially changed from the first time that I walked back there with Dr. Berger, and he said, "Watch out for the snakes," and I kept my eyes open pretty much that day. The summary of the project, and I think the board would be interested in this. When the project was bid, Bales Construction was the successful bidder. Their base number was $923,000, and we had allotted through allowances, and you'll see the allowances. There were 5 of them. We at a grand total sum of $65,000. So we anticipated that this project would cost up to $988,000. The various allowances, primarily, you'll notice I'm not going to read them all, but primarily they had to do with unsuitable soil in the. I'm probably not telling anyone anything new here in your region. Almost every construction project, we have to do some form of soil remediation, either because of rock or just the plastic clays and soils, plastic clay that's in the soils, oftentimes have to be removed and replaced. What we found is that even though we had allocated about $10,000 to the various line items, what we found is that the one that really absorbed the lion's share, more than the lion's share of cost, was about $27,000. A little bit more than $27,000 had to be spent on unsuitable soil. I'm going to go right to the next line item here. So what we had concluded that we would do is, because we felt as though we would not be using allowances 2 and 3, we actually merged those 3 together, and of the $30,000 available, we spent just a little shy of $28,000 in soil removals. The amount remaining in allowances 1, 2, and 3 was just a little over $2,000, as you can see right here. Allowance number 4 was not used at all. And allowance number 5, which was intended as the construction contingency allowance, strictly for items that would come up during construction that were obviously requested either by the school district or by the city. We did have, out of 4 of those, or 5 of those, we did have one item that was requested by the city, and you can see the associated amounts. We increased the electric service to the building, did some modifications to a retaining wall. The bollards, those are those protective pipes that are around the electric transformer, was requested by the city. And we actually had a relocated fuel tank, and the tank was not relocated, but the vent and the fuel dispenser was relocated so that it made site circulation work a little bit better. And then there was a modification, this just occurred about a week ago, modification to some chain link fencing. The total of that particular allowance yielded about almost a little over $23,000. We have remaining in that about $1,600. So if we look at the grand totals, the construction costs per Bales Construction never changed. It was $923,000. The allowance usage, in lieu of being the higher amount, only came to $51,220. Total project cost at $974,220.35. So the net savings or unused portion is just a little over $13,000. Can I answer any questions for anyone?
Questions or concerns? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
Item 8E, B2 heavily impacted presentation. Dr. Henry.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's been a while since you've seen this presentation. For some of you, by a while, I think probably over a year, and it's been through many different iterations, and now we've gotten to the point, we've got a couple versions on this. We have one that's got a few more details in it that you're going to see this evening. We also have a more condensed one that we can use for community groups and things of that nature. So tonight, myself and Dr. Berger will take you through these slides. Feel free to ask any questions that you have as we go, and then this will also tie into the action item we're going to have here later this evening. So first thing we have, we did the Patron Insight Survey, if you all recall, last year, and we found some interesting things out. And one of the things that we discovered was that and this is pretty typical in communities, folks did not have a real understanding of how we were funded in the district as far as our budget goes. And there was very little understanding of impact aid, how it came to us, what impact aid looked like. So as we were looking at trying to provide more information and increase our capacity in the community on what our operational costs were, what our budgeting was, what some of the revenues that we have, where they come from in the district. We wanted to really focus on, and we have for about the last year, on how we're funded and why we're unique as compared to many districts in the state of Missouri. So we've kind of, in our presentation, came from a perspective of, okay, trying to relate this to kind of what you have in the home and how we operate as a district, and then and the challenges we have, which Dr. Berger will talk about in a little bit, and then also the potential impacts on our community. So to start out with, as far as where our money comes from, we have state aid, we have local aid, and we have basic federal impact aid. And an important thing to remember with impact aid is it comes in 2 parts. You have a basic aid, and then we're fortunate, one of approximately 23 school districts in the country that receive a thing called B2 heavily impacted aid in our district. And that comes with some strings attached, some requirements that you have to meet to be able to get that B2 heavily impacted aid. And we're very unique as a district that we operate out of 2 funds, basically. Fund 1, which is kind of your operating costs, the checkbook, you're writing all the monthly bills and things like that out of. And then we have Fund 4, which is our capital projects fund. We have been very fortunate since the late 1990s to receive B2 heavily impacted aid. Over the last few years, our operational services department under Dr. Berger's leadership has got it to where all of B2 impact aid goes into our capital projects funds, and we don't spend any of that B2 heavily impacted aid on recurring expenditures in Fund 1. So that goes into capital projects only, and that's kind of like your savings account that you use whenever major big ticket items come up. That's what you go to, is your Fund 4. So we're very unique in the state of Missouri also in the fact that as a school district, we receive 22% of our funds from our local taxes or our local efforts. We receive 43% from state aid and 35% from federal aid. Now that 35% here is a big chunk in Missouri. That's larger. We probably have one comparison. That's the Knob Noster School District where Whiteman Air Force Base is. Now, Missouri averages, if you look over here, typically 56% of a school's revenue is going to come through local taxes. Ours is 22. About 9% is federal. Ours is 35. And 34% state. Ours is 43. So you can see we're very heavily reliant on both state and federal funds. When you look at us as compared to other districts in our region, again, we're very unique. This is up here in the left-hand corner. This is us. Just like I mentioned, you take a district like Camdenton, very high property value, wealth, assessed valuation. 75% of their money comes through local taxes. 11% federal, 14% state. You look at two comparisons which we always face when we talk about B2 aid here as far as our comparison districts, Rolla and Lebanon. Incidentally, both districts have passed a tax levy, or excuse me, one district, Rolla, has passed a tax levy and a bond. Lebanon has passed a bond over the last couple of years, which factors in to what we'll be talking about this evening. And you can tell they look a little more similar to the state, but again, we're very unique in where we're at as far as our community and our funding. So what do we use these funds for? Well, operating salaries, utilities, supplies, all these kind of things is what you'll use your typical checkbook for. And then our capital expenditures or improvement, this is what we do: major building renovations, HVAC repairs, plumbing, electrical issues, facilities upkeep, security, those kind of big ticket items. So for example, this school year, when a compressor goes down, we've spent probably in the last few months about $100,000, Dr. Berger, out of Fund 4, okay? And so that gives you a good example of those expenses that just come up when you're operating a school district, and that gives you an example of what we would spend those things for. Also, we have done most of our building in this district over the past several years exclusively out of this fund. A question that I typically have come up is, what about the middle school and the plans we have on the middle school and those things? The only reason we're able to do the renovations and the updating to the middle school is because of B2 heavily impacted aid. We've saved that over the last several years. Nothing we're talking about tonight as far as new revenues has anything to do with that project. It's all because we've been able to save and keep these funds something we can put back to make, to make major renovations. Dr. Berger is going to go over a few things with the finances here.
Give Dr. Henry a break here. This is certainly not a new issue, though. Whenever I entered the district in fiscal year 14, that's when this was really, we were really confronted with this. Next few slides will emphasize a little bit of what Dr. Henry's talked about in terms of comparison of how we compare to other districts, but also this B2, this one of 30, typically less than 30 school districts in the nation that qualify for B2, and B2 is the law citation, but also referred to as heavily impacted, so it puts us in very exclusive company. And so the very first thing, though, is we are subsidized by the federal government because we can't tax Fort Leonard Wood. And if you kind of have a good handle on that concept, if we don't have lake property like Camden that we can tax, it's on post, we cannot tax that, so the federal government's going to come in and subsidize that. However, they don't want you just to live off that. You have to pull your own weight. So that's kind of the overall theme above everything. So this shows a pretty stark comparison of $275, which is the state minimum that Waynesville operates off of, versus just the state average of $408. And so funds 1 and 2, typically your what's termed operating funds, and then Fund 4, the capital projects down here. And you can see debt service, we don't even have a debt service. We only have an operating fund, but no debt service. We don't have any general obligation bonds out either. So in total, 408 versus the state minimum of 275. That puts us in exclusive company, too. There's 29 school districts that run a total levy out of 500 in the state of 275. So that's really the issue, but we're going to continue to emphasize that. When we look at comparison, and we're not stacking the deck on this comparison, you tell me the school district, I'll tell you what their tax levy is. I have it on a database. If we were stacking the deck, we certainly wouldn't have Camdenton in there, because Camdenton, because of their high assessed value, can have a smaller levy. But school districts that we're often compared to, Columbia at 547, 331 at Rolla, West Plains, our OC colleagues, Ozark Conference colleagues. But again, out of 500 more than 500 school districts in the entire state, we're one of 29 that'll have that 275. Through discussions, it often came up with patrons and even staff, and early on with the Board of Education, how do we compare with the Frisco League? And sometimes some of our folks will think, well, those are geographically in close proximity to us. And there is no doubt all the school districts that have lower local levies are in southern Missouri and more southwest Missouri. But even if you look into the conservative Frisco League, which, geographically we do compare to, I mean, they're here close to us, we're still at the bottom at 275. However, a couple of those 29 school districts that also have 275 levies, Licking and Stoutland, are also there with us. So up to 364 to down there at 275 in that comparison. This one's interesting because, as Dr. Henry mentioned earlier, out of those 23 school districts that are heavily impacted or B2, 2 of them are in Missouri. Fort Leonard Wood in its association with Waynesville School District, and Knob Noster in its association with Whiteman Air Force Base. In 2013, fiscal year 13, the issue came up of Waynesville and Knob Noster may not be pulling their own weight to earn B2 eligibility. We'll look at a slide that'll kind of illustrate that in just a moment. In April of 14, Knob Noster passed a 75-cent levy. So they were they attacked the issue and pushed their levy up to $3.50. And there's perhaps a variety of reasons why they were able to do that, but really the most obvious reason is Knob Noster is in close proximity to Kansas City, where $4 and $5 levies are the norm. They're not the exception. That's the norm. I looked at some data today that was FY16, would be previous year. There's a handful of about 15 districts in the Kansas City area that have $6 levies. The highest was $6.80 Lone Jack. So I think whenever they looked at and Dr. Henry and I certainly have talked to leadership at Knob Noster and kind of got a sense of what they thought, the reason why they pushed the 75-cent levy so quickly, but they just knew they could get it done politically. They knew, and they also knew 75 cents was going to give them some safety for upcoming years. We had projected out, and we felt safe for the short term, but knew all along that it was always when we would fall out of eligibility if we maintained a 275 levy. So, impact aid. If you have 3% in ADA that are military impacted, you're going to be eligible for basic support. So our neighboring school districts, Dixon, Lakeway, Plato, they all get heavily impacted aid. They have 3% in ADA in attendance, and that makes them eligible for that. They don't get $5,600 per student because they live off post. Those kids live off post. It takes 5 students for them to get the full $5,600. For about 1,600 of our kids, we would get that $5,600 because we have that many kids living on post that attend our school district. If you are one of those 23 school districts in the nation, or if you're one of those 2 school districts in Missouri that qualify for heavily impacted, or B2, you have, and we'll look specifically at that criteria, that boosts up your funding to $3,000 per student. If they live off post, it takes 5 students, or 20%. I've got to go find 5 students to make 1 student and capture that $3,000. That difference is anywhere from $3.5 to $5 million. It's exceeded that at times, but we can bank on that if we qualify for heavily impacted B2. In fact, the last 3 years, that difference from basic support to heavily impacted has averaged $8.5 million. It would take an excess of a $2 levy for us to generate $8.5 million. We generate on our 275 levy currently, we only generate $8.2 million. So a $2 levy would not generate what we get in B2 funds. But how do we get eligible? So what's the criteria? And I know the board's becoming pretty familiar with this, but one last time. First of all, we have to have student enrollment. Now, again, 3% for basic support, but to get into that next category, you have to have 45% of student impaction, okay? And we easily qualify for that because our impaction is typically 70%. That one's easy. That's a piece of cake for us at this point. The other thing that we have to monitor is per pupil expenditure, and we have to stay within 125% of PPE, or per pupil expenditure. So basically, the feds say, we don't want to fund you so much that you're exceeding your state average in per pupil expenditure. We monitor that, but right now that's a piece of cake too, because we're we're below state average and well below that 125% benchmark. So we've got even room to grow in our per pupil expenditure and still be safe. But this one's it. This is the problem, this third qualifier. District must make a reasonable local tax effort, which is defined as 95% of the average of the comparison groups. With what Dr. Henry was showing you, what I've showed you, and you just shuffle those 500 school districts every way you can to find a group of 10 that you can show that you're 95% of the average. But when there's 500 school districts in the state and only 29 of you are running a 275 levy, it's harder and harder to find that comparison group. So what does that mean? That means under those sorts, as we project out, we knew it was coming. We've been talking about it since it really hit us in the face in fiscal year 13. But following this trend line, we're going to be heading out. Now, we project out, and if Prop C, our statewide sales tax, that has a very small variable in the calculation stays strong, we look to go out in the next year or two. Our projections are conservative. They have to be. We can't make a mistake on that. Why has that trend line dropped? The trend line dropped is pretty simple, that whenever the recession hit, comparable school districts, in fact, many school districts in the state had to recoup some of those lost revenues that they got whenever the state went south and they weren't generating money from the state. So what did they do? They went to their local patrons, and we've seen it over and over and over and over again. Districts continued to raise their levies, raise their local effort. And, of course, each time that happened, the recession really hurt us because the more aggressive that school districts got in raising their levies, the fewer and fewer comparable school districts that we could find that would maintain our eligibility. And from fiscal year 08 to 16, the Missouri average levy increased by 25 cents. And so what's proposed is a 20-cent levy. Not, again, Knob Noster, 75 cents, 20-cent levy here in Waynesville. And the question that always is very predictable is, okay, what does that do to me as the patron? How much am I going to have to pay? And one thing that's very often used is you go out, you find out where the average home sits in terms of assessed value, and for Pulaski County, for our school district, that's about $150,000. And then you run that 20 cents through the formula to see how much that patron's going to have to pay. And for that $150,000, and that's been identified as the average home, it's going to be $57 a year, $4.75 per month. Obviously, some homes are not valued at $150,000, and that works up there. You can see at the $50,000 and $100,000 benchmark. And certainly there are some homes that are valued more than $150,000, and those descend down there. It's also assessed on personal property, and I think that's pretty common knowledge. That's very difficult to calculate because, for the most part, personal property depreciates at a pretty rapid rate. So if you kept all your own, if I was a average household and I had 2 cars and we didn't upgrade our cars, the increase would be offset by the value of those vehicles depreciating. But the classic example, so you can compare oranges to oranges, apples to apples, is, okay, what's it do to that $150,000 home? And that gives me some sense of what that increase is going to do to my family. That 20 cents of proposed levy maintains that $8.5 million in federal funding, B2, heavily impacted federal funding. That's a 1,400% return on investment. In other words, for every dollar that our taxpayer puts forward, local dollar, local effort, it preserves $14 for the school district. It's a pretty stark or, obvious return on investment. And so what does that do? 75 cents would have put us way up here under the projected line. We feel very confident in our projections. We feel we can't tell everything about the future, but what we wanted to do was something reasonable, and 20 cents was what was proposed. And what we wanted to capture in that was a decade of safety. Did we feel very confident that if we were able to approve 20 cents, if our community would that put us safely in for B2 fundings for a decade? And that's what you see demonstrated here by that trend line. Tax levy comparison, and so you throw that 20 cents off. If the community were to support that, where does that put us? And I can tell you, any person in the state that looks at Camdenton knows, if you know anything about school finance, maybe even local politics, you know why they have a low levy. They can just a few cents against their giant assessed value generates a lot of funding. So really, Camdenton is an outlier, but it's an outlier that isn't really favorable to our comparison. I mean, they're close, so we want to be very transparent with that. But Camdenton really is an outlier. They have a huge amount of assessed value per student, and we would tick slightly above them. And then, of course, you can see there's still a lot of room to Rolla, and then, of course, Nixa, Columbia. And if you started comparing urban Kansas City area, urban St. Louis area, which in a lot of ways our demographics look like, those would all be in the $4 to $5 range. And so where would that put us at in comparison? If the patrons were to approve it. Again, going right back to that first slide that we looked at, 408 versus 295. I kind of whipped through there. Was there any questions that anybody jotted down before I turn it back over to Dr. Henry? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Berger. But again, this is very important. And one thing I've talked to many community members, business leaders, folks about this resolution will be before you tonight. And really want to reemphasize to the board, 20 cents, we were trying to be as practical as we can be with this. Knob Noster, they are in a different situation, ran right out, did 75 cents. We don't need that much. What we need is enough to protect ourselves over this decade, and continue to monitor the situation closely, do the best we can to extend it out as far as we can. So we want our taxpayers to know we're trying to be very, frugal and conservative with this to make sure we protect what is 12% of our budget. So, of course, you get into a couple factors here. First of all, you add the taxes, you're going to generate approximately $600,000 in revenue. With that money, what are you going to do with it? So it's going to be an addition, and that's a great question. First and foremost, and this is where our initiative is unique. We're doing this to save $8.5 million a year. That's the number one issue that we have, and a very important issue. However, there are still needs as a school district, and when we did that patron insight survey, we found some definite needs from our community, and one of which was security. Things like an additional security person at the elementary levels. We do have a East Elementary that's at 1,000 students. We have Freedom Elementary, it's 980 students, and having somebody to help with security there. We have camera needs in our district, both in hardware, upgrades, software, just organization of some of the cameras that we have in the district. Another thing that we talk about quite frequently is technology. And as we know, technology, when we talk about that in terms of education nowadays, is not just the computer lab. It's getting technology in the hands of kids to use during the instructional process. And that's what we're wanting to focus this, the money on, are on these two areas, if the levy were to succeed and you choose to place that on the ballot. Another key thing that I've heard out in the community, and I certainly understand this, we're fortunate in the fact that we don't run a lot of bond issues around here, haven't in a long time, because of B2 heavily impacted aid. As Dr. Berger mentioned, when we went through a recession, districts were forced to go out and increase levies and things of that nature to generate more revenue for their district because state aid was also prorated at that time. Fortunately, we're able to take this money and due to good, sound, long-range strategic planning, able to put that money aside to do things to address our needs without having to pass bond issues for things like our middle school renovation. We don't have to go out there, didn't need that money because we have the B2 aid that we've set aside. In addition, this is something I spend a great deal of time with in my world, base realignment and closure. And a lot of folks talk about, well, we have, we've just had a recent election. Could this change? The fact of the matter is we don't know. And even if more money is invested in the military, we want to have our best foot forward when it comes out to make sure that that money and those opportunities come to our installation. Okay, so this does play a key role in integration with our community because one thing that we know for sure is education will be at the top of the list when it comes to base decisions for the Army in the years to come. They stated that very clearly. General Odierno stated that if you want to do something for us to increase our investments in your community, improve the education for your kids. And as we all know, this has always been an issue. Every time they've come in, they've looked at, what are your facilities like? Do you have empty facilities? Or you have facilities that aren't kept? Things of that nature. Fortunately, we've done very well on that, and it was part of our motivation behind making sure to get our PIC educational volunteer facility standing up again, because we wanted to have good active functions in all of those buildings. It's always interesting, like with the high school, every time I'm out and I'll meet somebody from the Army or somebody from D.C. comes in, one of the first things they mention when they get out of the car is that your high school? And I'm always, yeah, that's our high school. Well, that's, for our real estate folks, that is curb appeal, all right? And it plays a role in what's going on. But never before has this played as much of a role, and that's student performance. So that's why when you look at what are key things that help kids, well, good, quality, safe environments help kids, Technology in this day and age help kids. So not only are we doing things to protect that we continue to offer this, we're also doing things to help protect that we can keep feeding this and keep growing in that area, which is very critical for us. And that's not just for base realignment and closure. That's what's best for kids. That's what's best for our kids that come here and may move somewhere else. This is what we want to do. And so through that, you get continued Army investment. And that's really what we're looking for. The question always comes up, when we met and discussed this, we did not want to take a scare tactic kind of an issue to our community because we have been very fortunate and we do enjoy great community support. But the question always comes up, so what if you lose it? What would you have to do? And I think it's relevant just to have one slide on this, that when the piggy bank busts and you can no longer buy compressors and you can no longer do construction out of that, you either have to run bond issues or you start writing checks out of your checking account over to there. And how, that's where it starts. Okay, what impact does it have on us? Well, out of this, you start looking at these things here when you cut. Because, what we're going to do first and foremost is protect the education of our students and the quality of teachers we have in the classroom. But to do that, when you lose 12% of your budget, would require significant changes in a lot of the programming that we have in our district, technology, student-teacher ratios, programs like Breakfast in the Classroom, programs like Read 180, some of these other programs we have that are highly effective programs will be lost. It's just inevitable. When you lose 12% of your budget, imagine if it's your home budget again. You lose that every year coming out. That's a chunk. Okay, so that's what we want to make sure that we avoid at all costs. So I would be happy at this time to answer any questions the board has regarding this topic. I know I have inundated you with information over the last year, probably even greater than a year, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Questions or concerns? Okay.
I think we all understand it because we've been doing this so long. I congratulated Dr. Berger because every time he would show what his presentation would be, I'd say, you got to make it simpler. Make it simple for me. Well, he's finally got it. Would you be willing to give $1 for your local school district so you can have quality education for your kids to get $14 back?
Yes.
And that's pretty simple. Even an old person like me can understand that. And I hope everybody else out there, all of our patrons, can understand that. Because if you ask them, what do you imagine our quality of education should be? They don't say, well, by the time they graduate, they ought to be able to write their name and do their numbers to 100. Mm-hmm. That's not what they say. We want our kids to be able to compete with everybody in the state, everybody in the country, when they go off to do whatever they do, go to college or get a job or whatever. We want them to be able to compete, not just on the same ground. We want them to be able to be above their competition. This is the way to show that that's the way you feel. Mm-hmm. That's all I have to say.
Any other questions or concerns? Okay, thank you, Dr. Henry.
Thank you.
Item 8F, MSBA Board Policy Updates. Dr. Henry.
Not quite as fast as I used to be. As far as our policy updates this month, this has went through tabs, all of this information. There's been some changes in bullying, harassment, hazing policies. There's been some additions made to our student discipline policy, so I would encourage you. This is a first reading on these policies. If you have any questions when you read over there, feel free to give us a call because I know this is something we frequently deal with, and there's quite a bit of meat to all of these this month.
Okay. Questions? Okay. Item 9A, MSBA Full Maintenance Service Agreement. Dr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am recommending that we take action on continuing our relationship with MSBA and the full maintenance service agreement. This is very beneficial. The MSBA takes a lot of the legal work behind policy building and gives us recommendations and suggestions. Of course, it's always important to point out to the public that we do have a group that comes in and looks at those policies, and if we need to tailor-make some of those policies to fit what we need here in Waynesville, we can do that. So that latitude is there with MSBA, but it's been a great organization for us to work with, keeps us up to date on all new changes in the legal world. So I'm recommending that action.
Questions? Do I have a motion to approve the motion? Mr. Anderson? Do I have a second? Mr. Keeling? All those in favor by show of hands? So moved. Item 9B, board candidacy filing dates. Dr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is that time of year where we need to set our dates for filing, and we have a wonderful Board of Education, and I know it's a high-paying gig, but I know it's very rewarding for all of you. But December 13th, 2016 through Tuesday, January 17th, 2017, will be the time period in which the seats are open to sign up for, with April 4 being the municipal election time.
Questions? Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation?
Make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Schultz. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Quinn. All those in favor by a show of hands? So moved. Item 9C, revised job description, second reading. Ms. Bales.
Thank you, Mr. President. The following attached job description revisions are presented as a second reading. 4.8.8 Student Information Specialist, 4.12.2 Guidance Secretary Middle School. The administration requests approval of the above job descriptions as presented, please.
Do I have any questions? Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. O'Reilly. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Mr. Schultz. All those in favor by a show of hands? So moved. Item 9D, increased local tax levy. Dr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Administration is recommending a ballot measure to increase the local tax levy by 20 cents for the purpose of securing B2 heavily impacted aid. Additional revenues generated by this increase will go toward providing funds to pay for increased costs of educational programs, school supplies, retaining quality staff and teachers, focusing mainly on security and technology for students.
Do I have any questions or concerns? Do I have a motion?
I'll make
Make
the
the
motion.
motion.
Mr. Keeling. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Schultz. All those in favor by a show of hands? So moved. Item 9E, annual audit, the F-16 report. Dr. Berger.
Thank you, Dr. Fulmer, and kind of putting the period on fiscal year 16. And Rebecca Frederick from KPM is here to review our FY16 audit. And Rebecca, if you want to come up.
Thank you very much. As Dr. Berger said, I'm Rebecca Frederick. I'm a CPA with KPM CPAs out of Springfield, Missouri, and we've audited the district's financial statements as of June 30th, 2016. We also do a federal compliance audit and also a state compliance audit while we're here. So I'll briefly go over the 3 different audits that we did. Do you all have electronic copies? Okay,
Yes.
If you want to follow along, we'll start on page 4. Page 4 is our independent auditor's report. The whole reason the district has an audit is for us to express an opinion on the financial statements. The district has received an unmodified or clean opinion, which is the best opinion that you can get. And that does make a big difference. You can get an adverse opinion, which is a bad opinion. If you ever do issue bonds or you issue any type of debt, they look at that opinion and make sure that it is good before they will issue that debt. And it can also affect grant awards as well. So an unmodified opinion is the best one. So we commend you for that. Next, we'll go to page 12. Page 12 is the statement of receipts, disbursements, and changes in fund balances. The general fund increased $866,000 for the year, leaving the general fund with $16.4 million. The reserves at year end were 25.66%. What that means is that you could go 3 months in the next year if you didn't get any revenue and still pay normal operating expenses. As auditors, we typically recommend a 25% reserve or 3 months. So we do commend you for that. Your reserve in the previous year was 24.28, so you did increase those reserves a little bit over the previous year. And the capital projects fund increased $6.7 million for the year, leaving it with a $34.8 million balance. Okay, next we'll go to page 13. Page 13 is where the notes to the financial statements begin. I'm not going to go over the notes, but they do give more detailed information on the types of investments that the district has, if you have restricted cash, your retirement plan, et cetera. So I do encourage you to read the notes because they are a required part of the financial statements. Okay, next we'll go to page 47. 47 is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. This is just the second page of what we call the CFA. And you can see down at the bottom, the district had $25.6 million in federal spending for the year. And like Dr. Henry and Dr. Berger pointed out, the district's federal spending is about more than a third of the total spending of the district. We audit 65 school districts, and you guys win the prize of the federal spending. So we have to come in. Anytime a district spends more than $750,000, we have to do a federal compliance audit. So we tested the Impact Aid program and also the Title I program for the year, and I'm happy to report that we don't have any findings on those programs. Okay, next we'll go to page 54. Every year, the state, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, comes out with a list of things that they want us to look at. The district sends information to the state periodically throughout the year on attendance and transportation, et cetera. And the district just sends electronic files. Well, they want us to make sure that you have source records to support that information that you're sending them. So we look at attendance records and transportation information as well, and some various other items, and I'm happy to report that we have no findings to report to the state either. So, okay, the last thing I want to go over is the management recommendation letter. Not sure what page it is on the electronic copy. There's 2 general recommendations that we have this year, and these are just general recommendations for all of our school districts because they're new laws or accounting standards that will affect the district in this new year. The first one is new overtime rules. I'm sure you've talked a lot about this, effective December 1st, which is just a week or so away. If you have salaried employees that are 12-month employees that are making less than a specific amount, they can no longer be considered salaried. So we're just recommending that the district make sure that you're in compliance with that new law. The second item is GASB statement number 77. I'm not sure how this will impact the district. It's just a reporting requirement in your audit report. So if the district or the city or the county offer tax abatements to any business for economic development and the district's missing out on tax revenue, you have to disclose that in your audit report beginning for fiscal year 17. So you will have to get with the city because there are times where the city can approve that and the district may not know about it. They can approve that without your knowledge. So it's just something that you have to disclose that you're missing out on that tax revenue. So does anybody have any questions?
Questions or concerns? Do I have a motion to accept the report as presented?
Make that motion.
I'm sorry, Lee, question or motion?
Make a motion.
Motion by Ms. Swant. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Anderson. All those in favor by a show of hands? So moved.
Okay. And
Thank you very
quickly,
much.
in closing, I just wanted to let the board know how helpful everybody at the district is during the course of the audit. Dr. Berger's office and all of the staff and everyone we come in contact with is very helpful and cooperative during the course of the audit, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Item 10A, there is a need for closed session, closed record, and closed vote as allowed by RSMO 610.021, Section 3, hiring, firing, and disciplining or promoting of employees, Section 6, scholastic probation, expulsion, or graduation of identifiable individuals, and Section 13, individual personnel records and performance ratings. Do I have a motion to go into closed session? Motion by Mr. Keeling, second by Mr. Quinn. Roll call vote?
Yes.
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 Yes, so moved. We will move into executive session.